Edward William Pritchard was born on 6th December 1825 in Southsea, Hampshire. He was born into a naval family. His father, John White Pritchard, was a captain in the Royal Navy. The world that shaped Edward Pritchard from his earliest years was one of order, rank, and respectability. The military world of the south coast of England, where a man's standing was measured by his position and his conduct, and where keeping up appearances was everything. Edward Pritchard spent the rest of his life keeping up appearances. He was extraordinarily skilled at it, and the gap between the appearance and the truth beneath it would eventually destroy everyone who trusted him. England, in the 1820s, was a country in the grip of change. The Napoleonic Wars had ended a decade earlier. Britain was the most powerful naval nation on earth. The sons of naval families followed their fathers into service or into the professions that surrounded it. For Edward Pritchard, the path was medicine. In September 1840, he was apprenticed to surgeons in Portsmouth. He completed his training, claimed to have graduated from King's College Hospital in London in 1846, and joined the Royal College of Surgeons that same year. He was commissioned as an assistant surgeon in the Royal Navy. He served on several ships, including HMS Victory, HMS Calypso, and HMS Hecate, sailing to various parts of the world. In 1848, his naval service took him to the Pitcairn Islands in the Pacific Ocean, about which he later wrote and published a pamphlet. He was, in his own estimation, a man of culture, learning, and importance. In the estimation of those who would come to know him better, he was something else entirely. It was in Portsmouth, while still serving as a naval surgeon, that Pritchard met his future wife. Mary Jane Taylor was the daughter of Michael Taylor, a prosperous retired silk and lace merchant from Edinburgh. They married on 17th September 1850 in London. Mary Jane was well connected and well regarded. Her family were people of standing. Her father approved of the match. The Taylors would come to regret it. Pritchard resigned from the Navy not long after the marriage. With the financial support of his father-in-law, he set up a general medical practice in Hunmanby in Yorkshire in 1851. He and Mary Jane had 5 children. From the outside, the picture was respectable. The reality of life in Hunmanby was very different. In Hunmanby, rumours began to follow Edward Pritchard wherever he went. It was said he seduced his female patients and blackmailed them into keeping quiet. He joined the Freemasons and cultivated an air of civic respectability. He bought a medical degree from a university in Germany, obtaining it in his absence. The qualification was purchased, not earned. By the time he left Hunmanby in 1854 to move to the nearby coastal village of Filey, his reputation in the town was already settled. A Sheffield newspaper would later describe him as a man who was politely impudent and singularly untruthful, who left in a state of discredit and debt. From Filey he moved to Edinburgh in 1859 and then to Glasgow in 1860. In Glasgow, Pritchard set up a practice in the fashionable Berkeley Terrace area of the city. He attempted several times to gain admission to the Faculty of Physicians and Surgeons of Glasgow. He was rejected every time. He applied for the chair of surgery at a Glasgow university. He was unsuccessful. The medical establishment of the city regarded him with suspicion that his charm and confidence could not quite dispel. But, to those outside the medical profession, Pritchard was something to behold. He was 5 feet 11 inches tall, well proportioned, with a pleasing face, a bald forehead, and a flowing beard. He was a plausible and confident public lecturer. He was charming at social gatherings. He was generous in his distribution of his own image. He had his photograph taken repeatedly and handed out copies to anyone he wanted to impress, including the women he pursued. He carried a photograph of himself, surrounded by his family, as a kind of calling card, a portable proof of moral character. He had been known to weep convincingly on demand. He was described by those who saw through him as the prettiest liar of his time. His nickname, in the circles that knew him best, was the Human Crocodile. It was on 5th May 1863 that the first death connected to Pritchard occurred. A fire broke out at the Pritchard family home at 11 Berkeley Terrace. A young servant girl named Elizabeth McGrain, aged 25, was found burned to death in her bedroom. What disturbed investigators was not the fire itself, but the manner of her death. The fire had started in her room, yet Elizabeth McGrain made no attempt to escape. She did not call for help, did not go to the door or the window, and never left the bed. The Procurator Fiscal investigated the incident. The fire insurance company refused to pay out, considering the circumstances suspicious. No criminal charges were brought, but the question lingered. Why had Elizabeth McGrain made no effort to save herself? No satisfactory answer was ever found. The family later moved to a larger home in Glasgow. Among the new servants was 15-year-old Mary MacLeod, who had come from a Scottish island off the west coast to work in domestic service. She was young, isolated, and vulnerable. Pritchard soon began an inappropriate relationship with her while his wife and children remained in the house. On one occasion, Mary Jane Pritchard discovered the pair in a compromising situation, though Pritchard denied any wrongdoing. In the months that followed, Mary MacLeod became pregnant. Pritchard secretly arranged to terminate the pregnancy. In a confession made years later in his condemned cell, he claimed this had happened on 3 separate occasions, though he denied being the father of the children. He promised Mary that if his wife died, he would marry her. He also gave her gifts, a ring, a brooch, and a locket containing his photograph. By December 1864, Mary Jane Pritchard had begun suffering from a mysterious illness. She experienced vomiting, burning pains in her stomach and throat, headaches, and periodic convulsions. What made the illness especially troubling was its pattern. When Mary Jane travelled to Edinburgh to spend Christmas with her family, her condition improved. But once she returned to Glasgow and to the care of her husband, her health deteriorated again. Servants who sampled food prepared for her also became ill. Even a medical student staying in the house developed symptoms later associated with poisoning. At the time, however, no one fully understood what was happening. On February 10th, 1865, Mary Jane's mother, 70-year-old Jane Taylor, travelled from Edinburgh to Glasgow to help care for her daughter. Mrs. Taylor trusted her son-in-law completely. She had supported his medical career financially and regarded him with deep affection. That trust would ultimately cost her her life. Within days of arriving, Mrs. Taylor also became ill. She ate food from the same kitchen and was given doses of Batley's sedative solution, an opium-based medicine she regularly used. Unbeknownst to her, Pritchard had altered the preparation. A second physician, Dr. James Patterson, who had been attending Mary Jane, observed by February 24th that the symptoms strongly resembled antimony poisoning. Yet, he remained silent. Out of professional deference to a fellow doctor, he chose not to report his suspicions to authorities. Jane Taylor died at 1 o'clock in the morning on February 25, 1865, aged 70. Dr. Patterson refused to sign the death certificate. Pritchard signed it himself, listing the cause of death as paralysis followed by apoplexy. The explanation made little medical sense. Paralysis can result from apoplexy, not precede it. Even in falsifying the record, Pritchard revealed his carelessness. Mary Jane Pritchard continued to decline. She died on March 18, 1865, at the age of 38. She had been married to Edward Pritchard for nearly 15 years. Pritchard registered her cause of death as gastric fever. At the funeral, he asked undertakers to reopen the coffin so he could kiss his wife one final time. He wept openly and appeared, to all outward appearances, to be a grieving husband. But only days after the funeral, an anonymous letter arrived at the office of the Procurator Fiscal in Glasgow. The letter raised suspicions surrounding the deaths of both women. It was widely believed to have been written by Dr. James Patterson, the same physician who had recognized the signs of poisoning weeks earlier but failed to speak out. That same evening, Edward Pritchard was arrested at Queen Street Station in Glasgow. The bodies of both women were exhumed. Post-mortem examinations revealed significant quantities of antimony in the remains of both Mary Jane Pritchard and Jane Taylor. Investigators also discovered that Pritchard had purchased more antimony from Glasgow chemists than all of his medical colleagues combined. He had additionally bought large quantities of chloroform and tincture of aconite. Pritchard was taken to the High Court in Edinburgh on 3 July 1865. Large crowds followed the police van up the Royal Mile as it made its way to the court. The Scotsman newspaper described Pritchard on his arrival as appearing sad and thoughtful and cool and collected. The trial lasted 5 days. The prosecution was meticulous. They presented the pattern of poisoning, the purchases of antimony, the illnesses that followed meals, the servants who fell ill from tasting the food, the medical student who had grown sick during his stay in the house. They presented the death certificates Pritchard had falsified. They called the servants who had worked in the household. Mary MacLeod was called to give evidence. She was asked about her relationship with Pritchard. She reluctantly confirmed that the doctor had been having a sexual relationship with her. She confirmed that he had promised to marry her if his wife were to die. The defense attempted to turn this against her, arguing that it was Mary MacLeod herself who had administered the poison. The jury heard this argument and dismissed it. The Solicitor General addressed the claim that Mary Jane had died of gastric fever as Pritchard had certified. He told the court, "Nobody could have thought it was gastric fever. Nothing of gastric fever in it." The jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty on both counts of murder. Pritchard was sentenced to death. In the days that followed, in his condemned cell, he confessed. He admitted that he had poisoned both women. He admitted that he had administered a fatal dose of chloroform to his wife on top of the months of antimony poisoning that had already destroyed her health. He confessed to performing 3 abortions on Mary MacLeod. On the morning of 28th July, 1865, at 8 o'clock, Edward William Pritchard was led onto Glasgow Green at the Salt Market end of the city and hanged before a crowd estimated at 100,000 people. The executioner was William Calcraft. Pritchard was not afforded the courtesy of a curtain around the scaffold, a deliberate decision in recognition of the nature of his crimes. He was 39 years old. In the days before the hanging, a photography firm in Glasgow sold souvenir photographs of Pritchard for £1 each. They were the same images, taken from the same photographs that Pritchard himself had distributed throughout his life to anyone he wanted to impress. In death, as in life, his image was everywhere. The irony was not lost on the city. Both Mary Jane Pritchard and her mother Jane Taylor are buried in Grange Cemetery in South Edinburgh, in the grave paid for by Michael Taylor, Mary Jane's father, the Edinburgh silk merchant who had helped fund the career of the man who killed his daughter and his wife. Hello everyone, thank you for listening, and drop any feedback below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hope to see you again right here on Cold Case UK.